So let's get started. Welcome to all of you to LEAD5050's webinar series. This one is called Lift as You Rise, Women Lifting Women Up. We have two very special guests with us today. Lisa, who's gonna wave a little hello right now.
Hi, everyone.
And Gazelle.
Hi there.
And this webinar is co-hosted by me. I'm Nadine Valady with LEAD5050 and Maria Castro, who is a founder of LEAD5050.
Hi, hello.
So we are here today because we really have been told, or you have shared with us in many instances, that the importance of you being in our group. You are all members. Everyone who signed up for today's webinar is a member, really recognizes the importance of the support group, the network that is LEAD5050. And we recognize through that there's a question we need to ask. It's awesome to have a network, but what happens in the actual workplace? How does that network sort of influence you in the workplace? Are we making the right moves to support the women around us? And are the women around us also supporting us in our careers? And how do we get that to happen? So before we even get started, I would love for all of you to go to the chat box. You're all familiar with Zoom at this point. Please go to the chat box and tell us who you are, and tell us specifically what you hope to get out of this webinar. Why did you sign up for this one in particular, and what do you hope to get out of it? And as your answers come up, we'll share those with the group.
Maybe in the meantime, we can just give a little background on ourselves.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I thank you, Nadine, for asking me to participate in this. And when you did, I immediately thought, well, you said maybe choose someone else to help you co-host this, and I chose Gazelle. And so my background is I've worked in language schools and language school chains for many years, and I was a school director at one time, and Gazelle was the first person that I hired to work with me when I was running a language school in Oakland, California. And Gazelle and I've been an advocate of hers and working with her, and now we've become good friends over the years. But I couldn't think of anybody better to jump on this with me, because we've truly had a collaboration over the years that was very much give and take, not just one-sided at all. So that's why Gazelle is here presenting today with me.
We are a very good example of a manager recognizing another sort of junior female who had the motivation and did a lot to support them along the way, including helping find opportunities of employment, to advice on how to handle conflict in the workplace, to all kinds of things. So.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the two of you. And I think, Maria, do you want to share a little bit also about your connection to this topic?
My connection to this topic, well, the reason
you can be transparent. We've talked about it before, sort of, and we'll tackle a lot of tough questions during this webinar. So maybe you can start us off.
We have many interesting answers already here in the chat box. Have you seen them? So basically, this is what this is all about. Heather says, I am an executive assistant and would like to better support women in my organization and learn tips on how to do that, best practices. So Jen says she wants to know how to best leverage her female mentors and then how she can help other women in their careers with what she has learned. Kathleen wants to better support her female direct report and other women around the company and to understand techniques she can use when she feels other women are not supporting her that should be. So it's all about supporting each other, basically, which is what LEAD5050 is about. Because, okay, my take on it is that in the we live in a world in which the definition of success is a very individualistic one. It's all about being the best, being winning, right? Being competitive, and that's what's considered desirable in business, what has been considered for a long, long time. But that paradigm is not serving humanity anymore. I mean, it's making us sick, it's making the world sick, and it's all about shifting that into collaboration and cooperation. So in a nutshell, that's my take on it.
Yeah.
And this is what we do here.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, so we've got, thank you so much, everyone, for putting yourselves out there and telling us what you hope to get out of this webinar. I think that the question and the question of how can I provide support or how can I get the support I feel I need, I think really comes up in many of these comments. So thank you for sharing them. And that's what we're going to really talk about today. And I think we hope anyways to provide you with some very, very concrete next steps and action points that you can take on both sides of that equation. So we've got the topics here. I think, you know, the first question is, why is this even a webinar topic? And I think a quick answer that I'll provide here is that I think, as Maria pointed out, like there has been I think for a very, very long time, a paradigm in the workplace specifically. We're all career women here, and that's why we're part of LEAD5050, where we may have felt that the positions, the leadership positions for women were scarce, and that maybe we had to kind of fight our way to be the only woman at the executive level, for example, or be the only woman in a director role. And that may have created a little bit of a situation between women in the workplace where it's been competitive rather than actually being supportive. And what we really wanted to talk about today is like sort of how to break that pattern and how to actually make it fully supportive. So let's go to the next slide, where we will just start with some quotes. And I'd love to invite Gazelle and Lisa to tell us if they have any reactions to these quotes, and to all of you here, read these. And also, again, in the chat box, please share with us if you agree, if you disagree, if there's something particular you're going to hold on to from one of these quotes. So Lisa, Gazelle, what are your thoughts on these?
Should I go first, Lisa?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I've always loved the first quote. There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. In preparing for this webinar, Nadine, Lisa, and myself had a long conversation just about this topic. And one of the things that I mentioned actually was that, aside from Lisa, after I worked with Lisa when I was probably in my first real job out of college at 23. I won't say how old I currently am, but it's been a while. And it's been a while. And at 23, I sort of thought, okay, this is what managers are like. They're supportive, they have your back, because, my experience was with Lisa. In going to other positions, I actually found that some of my female managers, whether they felt threatened, whether they felt that societal feeling of their scarcity and I can't, help my underling too much. I did feel thrown under the bus or just not supported by other women, to the point where at a certain point, when I was interviewing for roles, I was seeking out roles where I did not have a female manager on purpose. And which is sad, and one of the roles that I found that was sort of the beginning of a kind of career change from the education industry to tech marketing. I signed on with a male manager, and he was promoted and a female manager came in his place. And I later told him, I signed up to work with you. And he was shocked to hear that women wouldn't support other women, that he thought it would be a good thing that I had a manager that was a woman. And the fact that there is this tendency to feel like another woman is not going to have your back, is really what all of these quotes to some extent kind of remind me of. And it's important to think about how, in participating in discussions like this, how we can break that cycle, and break that feeling moving forward. So, another person in my position would not have that experience. That's sort of my 2 cents.
Yep.
Thanks, Gazelle.
Can I
What's
say
that?
can I say something to that ties in with what you said?
Yes.
The moment you realize how, the moment you start doing it, losing that fear of competition with other women, and becoming their allies and making them, helping each other and tapping into this other collaboration and cooperation paradigm, it feels so refreshing, so liberating. I say it from my own experience, because I grew up in for some reason, in a very competitive environment. And I grew up doing stuff like, oh, it's girls. Girls are, they are frenemies. Well, frenemies is quite a new word, but women are the very worst enemy. So that kind of exactly what you described. And the moment you realize you experience, in my case, another woman helped me. And that was an eye opener. Okay, enough of my experience.
I always love it when you speak, Maria. Everything you say is such a gem, really.
Lisa, anything to add on these?
Yeah, just quickly on the middle quote. I love this because it's, I mean, there's so many ways this is true, but I think that since many of us come from a teaching background and we're in education, we always have to remember the impact that we have on people that may not be as apparent at the time that we're interacting with someone and this is kind of being a teacher, right? And understanding the impact that you have on students, and then knowing that what you've experienced together in the classroom may not really come to any sort of practical, tangible outcome until years later, right? I think the same is true with just being a manager, being a professional, is that we just have to be our true, authentic, and kind and compassionate selves, and just doing that often is enough to be able to inspire someone who might see you as a role model, even if there isn't a like a formal relationship there.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think maybe one last piece, and is that on that last quote, surround yourself with only people who are going to lift you higher. I love that one. I think it's incredibly important to be surrounded by people who believe in us and who are positive with us and who encourage us. I also think it's incredibly important to learn to self-advocate for ourselves. This webinar is not about self-advocating, it's about supporting each other. But just a little plug, in March, we will have a discussion circle and a workshop about self-advocating. But I think that it really is a balance between the two, though we are focusing here about on supporting each other and celebrating each other. So let's move right into it. Here is the question: why does this even matter? Why is it important for women specifically to lift each other up? Of course, we all know, as a human race, let's lift each other up. But we're talking about women to women here. So let's move on to the next slide, and please. And I will.
I think we went. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, I thought so too. So we'll go to Lisa and Gazelle's kind of sort of initial notes on the answer to that question, but this is just really a repeat of what we mentioned earlier around this kind of concept maybe of scarcity. And for a while, that's what maybe bred this competition between women, or this feeling of defensiveness, or sort of territorial protection of our own careers, rather than viewing ourselves as a sisterhood. So one big element in breaking through that paradigm is developing self-awareness. And so maybe that's where we can move to those next slides, and Lisa and Gazelle can take it over.
Sure. Let me just add here before we move on, Nadine. I think that you're absolutely right. I think our normal human bias should be to help other people, right? That just should be what moves us and motivates us. But I think there are certain circumstances, like you say, that require some extra special attention. So while we should always try to do that, there are a scarcity of jobs. There are often women that need help getting noticed. This is a great opportunity or coaching. The other thing is that, and I ask Gazelle to share an anecdote here, but sometimes we need other women to help break the perception of what a woman's role in a particular situation should be. And just breaking that sort of stereotype. And Gazelle had a great anecdote about a Zoom meeting that I'd ask you to share, Gazelle.
Yeah, a great example of why this is important actually came up for me about a year ago. I joined a startup where I was very quickly promoted from the head of marketing to the VP of marketing to a COO role, which was amazing. And I still very much suffered from, I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, imposter syndrome. Being in meetings with our clients, I was always introduced by my CEO as a COO, or the second in command, or the brains of the operation. I mean, he used a lot of very flowery language to kind of describe my importance when we were meeting with a group of people. And about a year ago, we joined a meeting with a client, a partner, and as people started to join the call, I remember, if you guys have ever seen that show, The Brady Bunch, you know how on Zoom it always looks like there's like multiple squares of people's faces, and I was the only female in a Zoom call of 9 or 10, I want to say predominantly, or if not exclusively, white men. And I found myself, in an uncomfortable position inherently because of my imposter syndrome. But one of the funniest things that happened was on the call, there's a number of junior folks on the call, junior men who were project managers, a marketing associate. And of course, like in the course of the conversation, I'm sitting on the call, I'm participating, and I believe it was my own boss who said, "Oh, Gazelle, will you take notes on the call and send out notes after?" Normally, I mean, I did it, of course, just automatically because that's always the role that I've been relegated to. But I later, as I was thinking about it, I decided, I realized how ridiculous that was, that I was a COO of this organization. These are my clients, and there's at least three or four other men who are younger and clearly more junior on the call, and I was the one asked to take notes, which is a primarily secretarial, sort of very traditional female kind of thing. And in order to not forget about it and sort of forget about that moment, I took a screenshot of the Zoom with all of the faces, all of the men's faces and myself. And I look at it on occasion for specifically this reason of why is it important for me to lift up other women in my role. One is very clearly, you want someone else in the room to have your back. Two, you want to create more opportunities for women in the future, so you're not the only woman on the call. And three, if there had been other women on the call, I feel like that would have created this almost like a norm, like not the only woman is going to take notes because there's more than one of us. And I think that that's an interesting and an important thing to think about. This sentence that's on the screen, you know, a woman alone has power, collectively we have impact. I may have had power to some extent as a COO, but I didn't have the impact in that particular moment to be able to say, well, you know, actually I need to, you know, participate in this call. Why don't we have someone more junior take a note? I believe if I had said that, probably something would have gone off in these gentlemen's minds that we have a senior level, you know, woman here. She shouldn't just be taking notes. But, you know, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable saying that to a room full of men. I think if there had been other women there, I probably would have felt much more comfortable, and that imposter syndrome would have been lessened to some extent. So I think that that's one of the things that came to mind in thinking about why is this important. It's selfishly also a good thing. So that was my little anecdote.
So good. Can I tell one, Lisa, Nadine?
Yes, please.
Okay, just quickly. Okay, I was at a conference. I'm a business owner. I have an agency, and my business partner is a male. We have it 50-50%. I own 50% of it, so we're equals. And this gentleman I've known for ages from the industry, he asked me, "Where's your boss?" And I was like, "My boss?" And I went off. "He's not my boss." How? I was like, "How dare you?" No, I said, "No, he's not my boss. He's my business partner." And he said, "Oh, sorry. I always assumed he's your boss because you have such a soft voice and you look young." So he tried to justify why he thought that. He didn't say because you're a woman, of course. And yeah, so that's my little anecdote.
And I think, Maria, you bring in telling that story, and thank you for sharing it. I think you bring up a really good point that, you know, there are unconscious biases, or sometimes they're conscious, but we still practice them. But I think men hold them, women hold them too. And I think that, you know, I think, again, this webinar will try to really focus on women helping women and what's in our control. We can't really change the unconscious biases of other people that Gazelle has spoken to, that you have spoken to, but where do we hold power? What can we change? And I think that's maybe a good segue into this slide here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is really all about anecdotes, and it's just great that we're all sharing our stories here. I think I have two quick anecdotes to mention, and one is, as I mentioned in the chat, I'm glad that we have people here that are both looking at how to help women who are coming up, like where we're in the position to help them, but we also need help, right? And we need to be able to understand the actions and behaviors and motivations of the people and the women above us, right? So, and how we can impact the situation where we're the subordinate person. So two things to mention here. Initially, I was the most insecure person imaginable years ago, and terrible fear of public speaking, took everything personally. And I realized, I don't know how I realized it, but I did realize that it was holding me back professionally, just being so sensitive and not being able to make a presentation. So I went and got myself some professional development, and I took a course called the Dale Carnegie course, and it just changed me professionally forever. But one of the biggest takeaways from that was that it was a management course, and they said that you should always be creating a person who really wants your job. Like, you should just always be cultivating your successor. Just always think of it that way, and you have somebody waiting in the wings, or just a collection of people who ultimately want to prove themselves and to do more. And I always approached my career that way, and looked for opportunities for people to be able to show that they can go the extra mile. You know, even if there isn't a position to promote somebody up into, there's probably a project you can throw to them, or give them some platform where they have the opportunity to shine. So, you know, now in these tough times, I imagine there aren't a lot of positions that we can promote people up into, but there still are little things that you can do that give somebody something tangible and allow other people to see that person, you know, and the potential that they have to offer. The other
I
thing
have a
I'll
great
mention.
example of where you did that with me, Lisa. I came in working for Lisa as an activities coordinator, meaning that I took students on excursions. Kind of a fun job for a 23-year-old. Didn't have a lot of sort of intellectual heft to it, I think, in terms of my being able to show off what I could do. When it came time for us to get accreditation, Lisa made a point to heavily involve me because she knew I was really organized and very detail oriented, even though it had nothing to do with excursions to San Francisco. I was brought on to, help my boss, the manager of the school. I was sort of your number two in managing and helping with the accreditation process, which I think helped the company see that I was capable of more. And I was in a very, very junior role. And so I don't think that another manager, were they not thinking the way that Lisa just described, would have given someone in that position the opportunity to work on such an important project. So that's a really good example of a direct report and a manager kind of helping each other in a symbiotic sort of way.
Yeah, because ultimately the project went better because of your involvement, you know. The other thing I'll mention from a sort of subordinate point of view, I had recently, actually a few years ago, a fairly senior level position, and I had a boss who was a woman who was difficult, very difficult, and a person who was easily threatened. We were talking about being threatened before. She made a point in public, of pointing out how I had done something improperly that was sort of an administrative, like setting up a meeting invite in Outlook. I hadn't done something right. So she intentionally, with an audience, put me in my place. And, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, we can't control their behavior. We all have these people that do these things to us at some point, and it's just easy to react and then snap back. And that's what we have to work and try hard not to do, just to not react to that and walk away and analyze it. And we'll talk about this in a minute, just about mindfulness and looking at, taking a step away and understanding that wasn't about me. It wasn't about the fact that I couldn't use Outlook correctly. It was that, she needed, for some reason, she needed to have that interaction with me and have it observed by other people. So, whether we're in a position to bring people up, or we're in a position where we need those above us to bring us up, we can only affect our own behavior. And an understanding of that, I think, will give us a bit of peace when we find people who are difficult. So Gazelle, did you have other?
Yeah, I had one other. I mean, I think I see in the chat a lot of folks are asking about best practices and what kind of things they can tangibly do. It's always really hard to say that the work starts with yourself, but that's the truth. You have to actively undo certain ways of thinking and reacting, and stop yourself in that moment. In a way, it not only shows your own professional growth to be able to have that self-control, but you're also fighting the stereotype that, I hate to use the terminology, but it's if you react and then get labeled as difficult or bitchy, then that's always the kiss of death in a lot of ways. One great example that I have that happened recently is in similar situation. I was brought on, like I said, as the number 2 in my last company. And about halfway through the pandemic, my boss says, I have a colleague that I worked with. Her name is Stephanie. And he made this comment. He said this, and it immediately unnerved me and made me feel threatened. He said, if you hadn't been available, I would have offered the job to her. So that made me think that if I didn't do something right, that this girl, Stephanie, was waiting in the wings to take my job. I interviewed her to come on as a manager, a mid-level manager in our organization. And I found myself making excuses to not like the girl. She was very much like me in her background, in her experience. And I slept on it, I sat on it, and I realized exactly what I was doing. I thought to myself, this girl has the exact same credentials and background as myself. And the sentence that he used, that he would have chosen her, if I wasn't around, made me feel like there was some kind of competition between us to earn his respect or earn the role that I already had. And I came back to him the next day and I said, initially I didn't want to hire Stephanie because of this comment that you made, but she's incredibly qualified. She's very well spoken. She's going to be a great asset for our team. And I'm going to basically fight my own instinct to feel threatened and bring her on board. What ended up happening, as you can imagine, Stephanie and I ended up being 2 against 1, with myself and her against my boss whenever he was doing ridiculous things or making poor decisions, because she was a very intelligent, capable woman, and there was absolutely no reason for me to feel threatened by her other than the fact that we've been taught to do that. So my point in bringing that up is that I actively had to recognize that I was doing something wrong in feeling threatened, and I had no reason to feel threatened. So I stopped. I made myself stop doing that, and just went forward with my gut instinct, which was, she's incredibly qualified, and this is a silly reason for me not to hire her. And you know, as I said, she ended up being an incredible advocate and a great team member. So I think these are things that we talk about. Tangible things is really confronting what it is that you're doing wrong to some extent, and admitting that you're doing something wrong to yourself.
Let me piggyback on that, Gazelle, because it's a great segue into our concrete steps slide here, because what you did was you looked inside yourself and realized that you were doing this to yourself, like you were creating your own agony, and then you worked it through. You know, that is really the key, I think, to a lot of what we're talking about here, is just looking at yourself. This and I'll encapsulate this under this concept of mindfulness, right? It's just, to me, mindfulness is taking an extra step to step back from a situation and analyze it in a way that we aren't able to do if we just react. And we typically just react, right? Unless we work at slowing ourselves down and forcing ourselves to step away, then we're prone to react. And often, if we react, you find a situation like Gazelle initially, where she felt threatened by this person, but ultimately, you know, she turned out to be an incredibly beneficial advocate. So, in our first of our tools in our toolbox here, this is my plea to everyone, is to do that. You know, just kind of, you know, take a step, take a breath, figure out the situation, and figure out what impact you can have, that might not be apparent at initial at the initial point of whenever this action happened, like my boss in the hallway. I could have just, you know, right back at her, but I didn't. I walked away, you know.
That's
so
a choice.
Just exactly, it's a choice, but we have to work hard at it. I wouldn't have done that 20 years ago. I would have snapped at her and put her in her place. And how can you talk to me? You know, absolutely counterproductive, right? So
and I think the important thing is I want to make sure that we're not giving the message that you're doing that because you want to be a demure female who doesn't rock the boat. You're not, she didn't confront her boss because she didn't want to rock the boat. It's because that's a controlled response that you kind of need to understand what the underlying issue is and address it privately with your manager, you know, later, in a review, in a weekly meeting, you know, and not even directly, but more like, hey, I sense that you've got a lot of stress going on. Is there anything I can take off your plate? Is there anything that I can help with, that might, you know, help bring down your stress levels? I think whenever I've said that, that's my way of saying to my boss, you're being difficult and I'm not confronting you about it, but I'm asking you if there's a way that I can support you so that you stop acting that way. I think that's not a lesson for just women because we want to say you should be demure. It's just a good way to manage up with your manager. And I think the idea of managing up is also important, when you're thinking about how do we lift each other up. We talked about, you know, what do you do to a subordinate? But as Lisa said, how do you deal with a person who's above you? And there is a way to lift up other women above you as well, by figuring out in a very delicate way to say, hey, you know, we're in this together. Like, let me help you look good. Like,
Yeah.
help me help you, kind of thing. And I think oftentimes your managers are also suffering from a lack of confidence, insecurity, and that might be why depending on their personality type, they choose to lash out and make an example of you in front of everybody else. But if you're coming at them in a way of, let me help support you to make us both look good and to make you look good, every manager wants to hear that. And over time they kind of will see that you're not the person to be snapping at, because you're their co-conspirator in some ways, right? So
Yeah. Confidence is, and please folks join. It's great that we have the chat going here. I mean, we're a small enough group that's easy to read and see what's there. I appreciate what everybody's written. I wanted to jump ahead to, well, Gazelle, would you mention the coaching? Because I know that's been critical to you, and then I'll jump in on the self-confidence piece and we can open it up.
yeah, a big part of how I've managed in the workplace, I definitely felt the imposter syndrome coming into the tech industry as a woman. Not only was our numbers low just in general, and I can see that it's increased over the last 10 years, but it's still low in terms of numbers. And there's certain industries that I'm sure a lot of you are in where there's not a number of women. I joked with a friend of mine. She said, have you thought about going to therapy? And I said, I don't need therapy. I need job therapy. And she said, well, that's called coaching. So I went to an executive coach and a job coach for the last 5 or 6 years. And that's the type of training and things that I've really focused my energy on. I've spoken to them about how to deal with mansplaining, which happened a great deal, how to deal with salary negotiation, managing up. One of the things that comes in every review I've ever had since I was 12 is that I'm too vocal, that I'm I need to know my place, which I hate that expression.
Yeah.
But that to me said it was more about the delivery and not the content of what I was saying. So over the years, I've really worked on the delivery. And I hate to say this, but it's true, but you do have to learn techniques for how to deal in these situations. The old me, or the untrained me and the uncoached me, would have confronted my, whoever, part of me would have been like, this is, not the way to treat a woman, and make a whole scene. But there's, that's not the way. Often, what do you say? You get more with a carrot than you do with a stick. That's often not the way to manage up, especially in a predominantly male environment. There are stereotypes about women that we have to constantly battle. So in a way, you need to lean in to fighting those stereotypes, and figuring out other ways, whether it's through coaching and some of these other techniques that we've mentioned here, to find a way to manage it. I would have never known the anecdote that Lisa gave. If it were me 10 years ago, I would have said to my boss in a review meeting, I really didn't like the way you confronted me about that Outlook invite. That's not the way to go. The way to go is, how can I support you? I can tell you're stressed. That is the result. Knowing how to have that conversation with your boss is a result of many years of coaching and taking these kinds of webinars and doing professional development. It doesn't just come naturally. I think that's the role of coaching, at least for me, in addition to obviously helping with what do I want to do with my life? How do I get to where I want to be? Those kinds of things I found coaching to be invaluable. And you can find coaches on Yelp. That's where I found, a whole list of mine, or just word of mouth, or on LinkedIn through professional connections. asking for referrals. So that's a great way to think about investing some time for development.
Thanks, Gazelle. Yeah.
Mhm.
And a lot of what you said too, the idea of confidence comes in here too, because the coaching obviously builds confidence. And as your confidence builds, then you can have conversations with your boss in a different way than you would have if you were acting from a less secure point of view. So that's our last tool here, is self-confidence and trusting your own judgment, valuing yourself, feeling your worth, and regardless of imperfections or what others may believe about you. What I'm getting very personal here. Gazelle knows this about me, but I am like a huge fan of RuPaul's Drag Race, and he often he said something that just has always stayed with me. He's like, look, what other people think about me is none of my business. And I think it's a good mantra. What you think about me, that's not me, that's you, right? And I only have a limited ability to impact what you think about me. So I need to have the confidence in myself to make a strong presentation, an argument to my boss, for example. But it also takes an incredible amount of confidence to be a boss and to let other people shine.
Oh, yeah.
So if you feel that you're lacking confidence, that is definitely something to work on. I can't tell you how to do that, because I think it's a very personal. Oh, Maria, you said, who said that? A guy named RuPaul.
RuPaul,
Yeah. So you need to figure out how you can build your confidence, how you can build your self-esteem. And a lot of that really is surrounding yourself with women who are supportive of you, people who tell you how capable you are and how much you've contributed, and just reinforce your value. But if you are feeling a lack of confidence, it would be the number one thing that I could recommend to you, is to find a way to build that confidence. And if you want to, you will, but it is scary. And in fact, we're coming close on needing to end here, but I have a whole slide here on confidence, just some things to think about as you're thinking about building your confidence. There are scary things, there are things that can feel risky, but again, if you sort of step back and analyze the situation a little bit, understand what you're doing to yourself in your own head, right, which is like number two. Like, often we create scenarios in our head that are not real. Well, if I do this and my boss is not going to, she's going to think that I'm being too loud or too vocal, or but you're creating that's you. That has nothing to do with your boss, right? You just realizing that you need to get out of your own way, and allow yourself to be your true self, and not react to the fantasies that your mind is continually creating for you. So I know that we're 9 minutes away from being done. We wanted to be able to have some conversation, and if anybody wants to speak up, you can unmute and add an anecdote or anything to reinforce, or
If you have a question.
to challenge what we've said. Sure.
Yeah. Oh, Giselle, I thought you were going to say something. Sorry.
Gazelle?
Oh, I said if anybody had a question.
Oh, I thought you said you had a question.
No.
Anybody want to? I'll stop this for a second. We've been talking a lot. Is there anybody that? Oh, hey, Bessie. Anybody that wants to add anything?
Maybe challenge Maybe you don't have to agree with everything. No?
I'd like to ask a question. Hello, everyone. My name is Chantal. Thank
Hi,
you
Chantal.
for this webinar. I wanted to ask, I'd never heard the term manage up. I wanted to ask how you would do that in the face of something like implicit bias. I had an experience before where it kept happening, and I was encouraged by other female colleagues to bring it up to my manager. And I did that, but not in the way that was expressed. I just simply said, you know, these are the things I'm noticing. And I just wondered if you were aware that this was happening. And so just to make a long story short, we talked about it, and she was quite surprised that it was occurring, and asked, we planned to come up with like a phrase whenever this habit of hers would occur. And of course, I never employed the phrase, but it continued to happen. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, how do you manage, I suppose, that?
I think sometimes I have found sometimes there's certain things you can say and control, and certain things that are just a little bit harder. When it comes to an implicit bias, sometimes it's not necessarily whether it's about gender or whether it's about, I have seen, especially here in the Bay Area, sometimes people have an implicit bias based on someone's appearance or, implied, orientation, things like that. And it's something that I think is hard to manage up, but there's the traditional way of talking to HR and making a whole thing, and nobody really wants to do that in a lot of those situations. I think what I have found, I have had that experience in a few situations where I wasn't sure if something was because of me or because of some unspoken bias that we really couldn't address. But the way that I dealt with it was by showing my skill set and the things that I could do to people outside of my immediate manager, meaning that I would volunteer for projects with other managers, even if it meant creating a little bit of extra work. Specifically, I'm thinking of an instance where I had a manager that was very close in age, very close in background. And I felt like she favored my younger male colleague to the point where words would come out of my mouth, and then the exact same words would come out of his mouth. And she would say, "Great idea," to him, and to me would say, "Keep thinking, Gazelle." Like it was the exact same thing, right? And I ended up going to another manager on the team and saying, "I'm interested in learning about these projects that you're working on, and if you can get permission from my manager to have me work like 10% or 20% time on the projects that you're running, I would love to do that in terms of my own professional development." In working with him, I hate to say that it was a male manager, I got the opportunity to shine in some ways because I wasn't dealing with that issue. As a result, they ended up kind of swapping, where I ended up being 75% on projects that he wanted me to be on because he felt like I had demonstrated an ability to do it, and I worked less and less and less under the manager that I had problems with. So sometimes the best way to kind of manage up is to go around, and find other opportunities where you can show your skill set to someone who doesn't have that implicit bias. And that person, an equal manager, maybe even a higher manager, when review time comes or when they're having some kind of meeting of all the managers and one of them says, well, I didn't really get a great impression, the other person is there to be like, hey, I've been working with her on this project and she's been fantastic. I don't know what you're talking about, you know, and finding a second advocate or third advocate within the organization or your company to be able to it might, like I said, you might be getting into yourself in a situation where your manager says, well, I can't spare you, and you're kind of going above, you know, your 40-hour or whatever your hours are, you're kind of doing extra credit in order to be able to get that opportunity. Maybe you're working a few more hours than you normally would, you know, that kind of thing. But it will pay off in the long run. So in my opinion, that like short-term sacrifice of working, you know, maybe kind of having to do double work a little bit is tiring, but it was worth it because I only had to do it for 2 months, and then it solved a year-long problem, you know? So, you know.
Thanks. Yeah. Great.
Giselle. Yeah, I wanted to add that, well, we are all women here, and we find our experience at LEAD5050 is that if you want support, a women-only group is great. It does support, but if we want to create real change, we need the men on board, right? It's tricky. We like to have our webinars women only because it's different. We speak more. Sorry to say it, but when we have men and women, it happens that the men end up taking over and they speak more, but it's not about men and women, it's about masculine and feminine traits. I mean, this culturally, the cultural construction of masculine and feminine. Anyway, LEAD5050 is, we do also have men on board who believe, because what we're doing is we are creating a movement of people who believe that gender equality is good for the world, is good for themselves too. Also men who are against this old-fashioned toxic masculinity construction. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to add. So today it's about women lifting women up, but those behaviors we just described about women not lifting you up are also observed with men. It's just this kind of well, I call it masculine energy. No negative, right? It's just this individualistic, tough, competitive approach from the Western capitalist world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So has anyone got any question, any comment, anything to add, any wishes? So please tell us what you need. Just drop us an email. As part of this community, tell us what you need most and how we can support you. We are going to launch this group mentoring for members. This will happen in a couple of weeks. You'll get an email. And if you have anything you need, just let us know and we'll come up with it for you. And thank you so much, Lisa and Giselle. It's been wonderful. Thank you for everyone else.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to drop my email address here to leave my email in case anyone.
I'll do the same.
Anything.
Yes, me too.
As always, the hour flew by, but we appreciate everybody sticking in.
You.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Bye.
day.
Bye.
Have a lovely day. Bye.